Today we'll be looking at an artwork by Anthony van Dyck, his Triumphal Entry. Anthony van Dyck was a Flemish Baroque painter, best known perhaps for his portraits, maybe unfairly typecast as a portrait painter, because he was also very skilled at painting biblical scenes and historical themes. The painting we're looking at today was painted in 1617 when Van Dyck was just 18 years old. The oil on canvas work is approximately 5 feet by 8 feet. Now, Van Dyck, during this period of his life, was an assistant for Peter Paul Rubens. And so his style, you can see when you see any of his paintings, was greatly influenced by Rubens' work. And often it's hard to tell who painted a painting because they were so close. Rubens had a workshop, so he had lots of painters working under him to assist him in finishing commissions. And Van Dyck would often paint part of a picture and Rubens was painting part, and their styles became so similar it was difficult to tell them apart. This was not unusual. When you see a work of art from this era that the artist has signed, his signature does not mean that he painted the whole painting. What it means is that he gave his stamp of approval to the painting, that it met his standards coming out of his workshop. But other people could have done the work. Sometimes it would just depend on the contract. If they wanted the master to paint the entire painting, the price would go way up. Oftentimes the contract would be that he would paint the faces or the main figures, and others would paint the landscape or minor figures. So this was a very common practice. Almost all artists worked within workshops at that time, where multiple people would work on a large piece of art. But this painting is just by Van Dyck, but done while he was in Rubens' workshop. As I said, they're Baroque painters, and the Baroque style developed after 1600, coming out of the High Renaissance and the Mannerist movements. And the Baroque painters wanted to distinguish themselves as different and distinct from Renaissance painters. Their style was very dramatic, full of exuberance, a lot of contrasts in light, movement, deep colors, surprise. They were looking to achieve a sense of awe and movement in all of their works. The Baroque style was most popular among the Catholic Church and the Counter-Reformation group. And part of that was just that it contrasted sharply with the austerity and simplicity of the Protestant Reformation artists. The Baroque painters tended to use warmer colors, primarily red and yellow and deep blues. They avoided the even lighting of Renaissance works. They liked the contrast between light and really dark areas of a painting and playing with the light and light sources. They didn't want tranquil paintings. They wanted drama and movement. And we find that in this painting. We have bold, slashing brushwork, clear, bright colors. Parts we're going to be looking at one detail a little bit later of someone who's just stuck in a very dark part of the painting. That was very much the style of a Baroque artist. Now, in this painting, you'll notice that there's no middle or background. Like, we don't have a big landscape in the background where we see off into the distance. Instead, everyone's been painted all the way to the foreground. It's like they're going to tip off the work at the front. There's not even, like feet of space before you're right there. They're all shoved into the foreground. And that produces a feeling of immediacy. If you remember when we looked at Simonette's work of Christ weeping over Jerusalem, there were two groups and there was a place for us to comfortably enter into the painting. We could be standing on that mount with them and fit in between the two groups and enter into the painting. That is not possible with this work. Instead, we as the viewer are pushed into the position of being part of the jostling crowd. There's no room for us to even enter at all. We're supposed to have the impression of being part of the crowd and being pushed about. Now, Van Dyck's presentation of Jesus' entry into Jerusalem is quite consistent with the biblical accounts. As I read the painting, we're going to start with Christ and then move to the bottom left and make a counterclockwise circle around the painting, noting the different scenes that are going on within the one work. So first we have Christ in the center, and he is riding a donkey, and the donkey is almost enveloped in his robes, and his robes are a rich blue and crimson. Blue is the color of divinity or heaven, and then red is the sign of humanity, sometimes of blood, But the picture we're supposed to be getting from this is that Christ is divinity wrapped in humanity. Now he's riding a humble donkey. We know that was foretold and that he's fulfilling a prophecy here. But riding side saddle is a sign in paintings denoting humility and poverty. And so the way he's riding the donkey is significant. He's riding in triumph into the city of Jerusalem with people shouting to make way for the king. And he's riding a humble donkey. He's not riding a beautiful white horse of a conquering hero coming in. And so you're supposed to notice that the triumphal entry and then the meekness and humility of the mode in which he enters. So Christ is surrounded by his disciples, all walking on foot, and by local people in the crowd that have heard about him raising Lazarus from the dead, and so they've come out to greet him. Now, we're going to move from Christ, and we'll be coming back to him off and on because everybody in the painting is relating to him. But at the front of the donkey is a man deep in shadow, and only the back of his head is in the light. But despite being in the darkness, he is the one who is obedient. He's humbly laying his cloak down on the ground for the donkey to walk on. So even though he's still in darkness, he's responding in humility to Christ. Then as we move up, we find Peter. And Peter, if you look in on his face carefully, he looks worried, concerned, perhaps even afraid as he's pointing toward Jerusalem. He's allowing his fear to rule him rather than the fact that he's with Christ to give him peace. He's following his fear. This is pretty typical of Peter. He's often the one who jumps ahead and states things too quickly and gets himself into trouble. He wants to be the faithful, steadfast disciple, but he's often not. And we know that he will soon deny even knowing Christ. But in the painting, he's pointing to Jerusalem and is afraid. He knows that the religious leaders are not real happy with Jesus right now. And Jesus is raising his hand to him to stop him, as if to say, okay, be quiet now. It's not quite on the level of get thee behind me, Satan, which Christ has said to Peter in the past, but it's a silencing of Peter's fear. Now the other, if we continue on around, behind Christ, the apostles follow lost in conversation. And it has been suggested that what they're conversing about is who is the greatest in God's kingdom and who will sit on his right and his left. And that they are having that discussion as we're walking into Jerusalem. And then leaving the disciples and continuing around, we come to who is to me the most fascinating figure in the painting. And it's this very muscular man with the light hitting his back who's carrying a branch and it's bent over in this kind of awkward position. And he's not carrying a palm branch, which would be the traditional Palm Sunday kind of tree that he'd have had. Instead, it's been identified as the branch of a poppy tree, and poppy trees denote death. And so we have this man, I'm going to say he denotes humanity, and he's carrying death, and he's walking alongside the donkey. If you look at the feet of the donkey and the feet of the man, they're walking along side by side. So death is now following Christ and the donkey. You could read it that way. You could also read it that he's a man, and humanity, death will come to all of us at some point. So he's carrying death with him. And if you look at his right foot, which is turned toward us, and you go in close, you'll see that he has 6 toes. And the 6th toe, which is in between his big toe and the next one, is deformed. The number 6 is the number for imperfection or for humanity. And so this man is imperfect. He has the need of a savior. He's going to die. And so that's what we know about him. And we see him there in such a central place in the painting with Christ behind him. And Christ is moving toward his human death, which will heal this man and give him eternal life. He will no longer be carrying death with him, and his imperfections will have been taken care of in the sacrifice that Christ is going to make. Van Dyck draws you into the journey the disciples are having with Jesus. You feel the immediacy of the painting as if you were right there with the disciples. I hope you have enjoyed this video. We have examined many other works of art on my YouTube channel and blog that I hope you'll explore. Be sure to subscribe to the YouTube channel by selecting the subscribe button below and give me a thumbs up if you liked the video. Those small gestures help out a great deal. And if you want to share the video via social media, that would be appreciated as well. We're excited about the work at kellybagdenoff.com and this YouTube channel. Our primary focus is to provide curriculum to educators that engages and nourishes the curiosity of students to explore their world and the world and ideas of the past. We believe that art history is the missing element in a complete curriculum, an element that enlivens a student's mind and motivates them to stay engaged with learning. If you are not a teacher and don't need curriculum, we still have materials for you: videos, blog posts, devotionals, and more. You can find our work and curriculum options at kellybagdenoff.com. And if you are still watching, thanks. By the way, there's a companion devotional video of this work that is more contemplative in nature. Just follow the link below.
Thanks for watching. Make sure to like this video by giving us a thumbs up below, and make sure to subscribe so you don't miss great commentary on classic works of art. kellybagdenoff.com is your source for great content and curriculum, as well as devotional materials using the medium of art. Make sure you visit and subscribe. Pablo Picasso said, "Art washes from the soul the dust of everyday life." So take a moment to share this video because art is too important not to share.
See you later, alligator.